You're listening to the weekly Parsha Podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramabit Israel, 5779-2018. This week's Parsha is Parshas Vayeshev. And in our Parsha we have the story of Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph, and his brothers, the dreams that he has, how he's sold down to Egypt. And as the Parshas continue, we'll see how he, of course, becomes the leader over Egypt, etc. Nestled into our Parsha this week, however, is a different story. And that is the story of Yehuda. Yehuda, who was the greatest of his son, of the sons of Yaakov, the greatest of the brothers, and who indeed would be the great-great-grandfather of David HaMelech, King David, destined for greatness, for kingship. The Torah tells us a story. And from this story, which I'd like to focus on, we learn some amazing, incredible, deep things, as I'd like to share with you from Reb Chaim Friedlander. The Torah tells us that Yehuda marries a woman, has two children with her, Er and Onen. Er marries Tamar, who our Chazal, our sages say, was a righteous woman, was actually the granddaughter of Shem. And Er is not interested in conceiving with her. He doesn't want to ruin her beauty. He wastes his seed. Torah tells us he dies. Onen does the mitzvah of Yibum, which we'll discuss. What is the concept of the mitzvah of Yibum? He marries his brother's wife, Tamar, in order, Hakim Shem Lameis. The idea of Yibum is to cause the name of the dead one to come back. Onen, too, is not interested in providing an opportunity for his brother's soul to be rectified. He wastes his seed, he dies. Tamar ends up with Yehuda through some interesting means. Yehuda ends up fathering two children who redeem the souls of his sons, Er and Onen. The two sons that are born from Tamar are named Peretz and Zerach, and Peretz ultimately becomes the great-great-grandfather of King David. So that's the story in a nutshell. But what is the idea of Yibum? What is the idea of the Levirate marriage of a brother, and in this case, in the Torah's times, the father, anybody who's an inheritor, someone who has the ability to, if the person dies, he would inherit the possessions of that person. So such a person has the ability, at least in the Torah's times, to perform a levirate marriage, make him the Shem HaMeis, bring back the dead person's, somehow redeem his soul. What is the idea here? What is the concept? What is the depth of it? And how can we learn something from it? So I'd like to read to you from Reb Chaim Friedlander. So at first he speaks about the fact that there is such a thing, before the Torah is given, that you can have the levirate marriage, not just for brothers, but even for a father or for a different Yoresh, a different person who could, in theory, inherit. But I want to get into what's the idea. Okay, so let's read this inside. He says like this. The Ramban explains that what is the concept of Yibum, of the levirate marriage, before the Torah was given. Very interesting, very deep. Whoever is able to inherit that person, so they're able to perform the levirate marriage. Boaz, we find in regards to Yehuda and Boaz as well, who was the offspring of Yehuda, who was the great-grandfather of David HaMelech. What is the idea? What is the connection between someone who has the ability to inherit, to also perform the levirate marriage, to perform Yibum? What is the idea? Also, we need to understand that it's no longer possible for it to be done by a father. Only a brother is allowed to marry the person who passed away, his wife. No longer is it possible to be done by anyone who could inherit. And we see from the Ramban, which I didn't read inside, but we see from the Ramban that the concept of the levirate marriage is directly, intimately related to the concept of Yerusha, of inheritance. We talked about Vort is something that we've spoken about in the past, which I'd like to expand upon. And that is that Yerusha, inheriting something, has to do with a continuation of the purpose, the life's mission of the person who passed away. Haril Bloch mi tells it Salbirsa in Yerusha. Rav Bloch from Telz explained the idea of Yerusha, that children, what do they get? They receive the property of the person who passed away, their father. Because the idea of inheritance is that the child continues the life mission of the father. Service of God, which is our purpose in the world, is split amongst the people of Israel, amongst the tribes, the families, in each individual family within those families. Every family within Klal Yisrael, and we're speaking about, here he's speaking about the families that are described in the Torah, has a special purpose and service of God. The purpose of the children is to continue with the mission of their parents in the world. And we can see that this is true from the very genetic makeup of the child. We find often that a child's personality traits are similar to their parents. Even their facial features are also similar to their parents. We think about it, it's natural to us. We don't really think about it. The fact that a child looks like the parents. But why is it indeed so? What's the idea? The external appearance of a person is an expression of what's going on inside of the person, what's going on spiritually with the person. The inner personality can be seen in the face. When a child resembles the parents, both in the way that they look and in their characteristics, the reason is because their purpose in the world is to continue the mission of their parents. Now, in order to continue the mission of the parents, they need to receive the same vessels, the same instruments that were used by the parents in their service of Hashem. So they get it in regards to their facial features, they get it in regards to their personality traits, and also in regards to the nachasim, the wherewithal that their parents have. It's given over to their children in order that they have the full ability to continue in their parents' footsteps. Nimsa in Cain, so it comes out, the fact that a child receives the inheritance of the parents is not just it's a right that they get, but rather it's an obligation. They receive an obligation as a result of that. In order that the children continue in the pathway of the parents' service of God, the children will continue in that service of God. This, says Reb Chaim Friedlander, is the concept of Yibum as well. Amazing, interesting thing. That just like there's a continuation of service of God in regards to the children of a person, right? When a person passes away, so there are individuals who theoretically can inherit from him. If there's a child, the son inherits from him. The father can inherit from the son. Other people who are kravim, other close relatives. But what is the idea? Again, the Yorshim, the people who inherit, it symbolizes the fact that they too have an obligation to continue in the pathway, in the service of God, and what that person represents in the world. They continue the purpose, the mission of the person who passed away. And this is also accomplished through bearing a child who is a continuation of the one who passed away. And through the obligation of the Levirate marriage, so a person, this is very interesting, and this is a point which I hope we'll be able to expand on. But the brother who marries his dead brother's wife, so in a certain sense, his children are a continuation of his own tafkid. But his brother had a specific tafkid, a purpose, a mission that wasn't fulfilled because he passed away. So the surviving brother is obligated to give an opportunity for that mission of his brother to continue. And the way that it's done is by marrying the woman that his brother who passed away was married to. And by having a child with that wife, so the brother who passed away, his spiritual legacy has an opportunity to continue. But notice, and we'll see more about this, but notice that what happens is that the brother who is surviving, the brother who is alive, who marries his dead brother's wife, in a certain sense he has to give something up. So we'll see that that's what Onen didn't want to do. Onen was not willing to give up his own mission in life, so to speak, in order to provide a space for his brother's mission to come into the world as well. Okay, because there's a certain giving up that a person has to do in order to provide space for someone else's mission to be fulfilled. He needs to give up to a certain extent his own mission. It's very interesting. Now, Ramban shoel al Rashi shekosav Yibum-Levirate hakim Zerach achicha shebeni karayach shem ameis v'hiksha. The Ramban asks a question on Rashi, who said that the son, very interesting, the son is given the same, it sounds like he's given the same name as the child. The Ramban says it's not always true. We find that when a child is born, it doesn't get the same name. What was the name? For example, Boaz had a child with Rus, and he was considered the Goyel. He was the one who brought the souls of Machlon and Kilian who died, who gave them an opportunity for their mission to be continued in the world. The child was not named after Machlon, rather the child's name was Oved, right? So what is the idea? Explains Reb Chaim Friedlander and the Ramban. What is the idea? The idea is that the name that we're speaking about, that we have to make him shame lemeis. We have to give an opportunity for the dead person's name to come back into the world. It means the name of a person represents his personal tafkid, his mission in life. The name of a person is a description of the essence of who he is. And so when we say that the person who's the new child is going to be born is going to be given a name, the name of the person who passed away, the idea is that he continues the mission of the person who passed away. Okay. Reb Chaim Friedlander continues. Onen did not want to do a spiritual kindness with his brother who had passed away. As we explained, the taina on Onen was, what was the problem with Onen? He didn't want to do kindness with his brother, to give up a portion of his own service of God, his own mission in life, to help out his brother, to give spiritual assistance to his brother who had died. He wanted his own child to have a continuation of his own personal mission, that his child should not be a continuation of his brother's mission. Yibum chesed ruchni, as we said, Yibum is a spiritual kindness. That the Yavam gives his brother a place in this world to continue his mission. Generally speaking, when a person dies and he has children, so the child continues with the purpose of the father, continues in the mission. As we find Chazal refer to the concept that a son is the legs, the extension of the father. When a person dies without children, what is the idea of Yibum? Then in the place of the fact that his son will continue, so the child is going to be born through the Levirate marriage, will continue the mission of the one who passed away. Onen wanted his own children to be his own legacy and not to help out his brother. And it's an amazing thing. There was something missing in his chesed, his kindness, a spiritual kindness. Of course, as Rikanti says, which we didn't read, but the Rikanti says that we have to understand these were great righteous people. We need to understand that they were being judged on their level. Nevertheless, there's a certain spiritual selfishness, not to give any space in his own spirituality to his brother. That spiritual selfishness actually had an effect on future generations. It played itself out many, many years later. Okay? How did it play itself out later? And this is very interesting. The Torah tells us extensively as to what was the situation when Peretz and Zerach were born. They were in the process. The twins were in the process of being born, and what happens? One of them sticks out their hand, and the midwife tied a string onto that child, onto that hand. This one came out first. That child stuck its hand back in. The other one came out. Wow, how you had burst forth. So the one who stuck out his hand first was not born first. The other one burst forward. That's why his name was Peretz, which means to burst out. And he, the one who was born first, was called Peretz, and he was the great-grandfather of David. Afterwards, the other one came out, the other child. He was called Zerach. And what was the idea? So he brings, I'm not going to actually read it inside, because I'd like to kind of be makatzer here today. I want to do it a little bit short and bring us to the idea, the crux of what I want to understand here and what I want to bring to ourselves here. That the idea here is that what happens, it brings from Rashi, that there was a great-great-grandchild of Zerach. Zerach stuck out his hand first. He wasn't meant to be the firstborn. Peretz was meant to be the firstborn. But Zerach stuck out his hand first. And there was a sheirish, there was a root that was there of someone trying to grab something that's not theirs, trying to stick out his hand to a place that's not his. Where do we see it mitbateh, that it's expressed later, many, many years later? There was a great-great-grandson of Zerach. His name was Achan. Achan lived in the times of Yehoshua, of Joshua. And Achan, when the Jewish people came into the land of Israel, so they captured the city, they destroyed the city of Jericho, and they were instructed not to take, since it was the first city that they overcame. It was the first city that they conquered. So in order to inculcate into themselves the recognition that it wasn't themselves, but rather it was God who did it, the Torah asks them, God asked them, not to take anything from the biza, from the shalal, from the booty. Achan was the only one who did, and as a result, because Achan took something that wasn't meant to be taken from, in the next battle, 36 righteous individuals passed away, because when Achan took from the booty, he created an effect on the entire Jewish people. The entire Jewish people was held accountable. His sin, it's like being in the mashal that the sages give, is like being in a boat and someone making a hole in the boat, drilling a hole in the boat and saying, "What do you mean? It's just me. It's just in my corner of the boat." But of course, it affects everyone, because if there's a hole in the boat, everyone's going to drown. Okay, so that was the sin of Achan. Where did it come from? It was rooted in a sherish, in a root which went back to Zerach. Zerach stuck out his hand early even though he was not supposed to be the firstborn. He tried to grab something, so to speak, that wasn't shaykh to him, that wasn't his. But where did it come from with Zerach? Zerach was a reincarnation of Onen. Onen, who wasn't willing to make him. Onen wasn't willing to impregnate Tamar and bring a spiritual rectification, a continuation of the mission of his brother Er. He didn't care about his brother. Spiritually, his soul came into Zerach. Zerach also didn't have a recognition. At a very elemental level we're speaking here. We're speaking, obviously everyone has bechira, everyone has free choice. We're talking about babies here. But there was something within him that said, I will grab something that's not mine. I don't care about someone else's portion. That expressed itself in his great-great-grandson Achan. Achan was willing to take something that wasn't his, have a negative effect spiritually and physically on the entire Jewish people, and cause the deaths of 36 people. So what is the bottom line here? What we see, the lesson here, which I'd like to take home from this, is two things. Number one, each and every one of us has a purpose in life. Each and every one of us has a mission in our avodas Hashem, in our service of God, and why we're on this earth. And that's something that's expressed in all of the tools that we have at our disposal, within our lives. Something that we give over to our children, physical appearance, character traits, etc., and as well as all of our bounty, all that we have. But there's also an obligation we see here. There's also a requirement. The Torah obligates us in something called arvus. Arvus means that I need to care about the spirituality of another person. And sometimes it might mean that my mission in the world may not be fulfilled in the same way. It might seem like I am losing something from my mission in order to help out someone else's mission in the world. And the Torah tells us that just like I have an obligation not to cause someone else damage through my sin, I also have an obligation to open up a space for somebody else to be able to fulfill his spiritual mission in the world. And that's what we see. It's the depth of what we see from the obligation of Yibum, the story of Yehuda and Tamar, and the births of Peretz and Zerach. And ultimately, the soul that comes forth from all of this is the soul of King David, the soul of Mashiach, of the Messiah. And he's the one who rectifies and brings everything into the place where they're supposed to be. That's the job of the king, is to place everybody into their proper place, to make sure that this Jew is doing his mission, this Jew is doing his mission, each Jew is doing their mission. When everyone is doing their mission properly, that's when we're in the times of the Messiah, of Mashiach. And that's the purpose, the main goal of Mashiach. So I want to bless you and I ask you to bless me. Hashem should help us to recognize our individual mission, to utilize the kelim, the means at our disposal in order to fulfill our missions, to be able to give over to our children the purpose for which they are in the world as well, to continue our missions in the world. And Hashem should help us to also be able to make space and to provide opportunities for others to be able to fulfill their missions, even if it seems that somehow our mission will not be fulfilled to the same extent. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos. This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.